in or out of Europe this Tuesday, marking the date the UK Parliament set Britain on its path to that EU referendum within the next 2 years. No date set yet. This was a campaign pledge by the re-elected David Cameron. First, a renegotiation of the terms of membership with Brussels, then a vote by the people. The Prime Minister, who's for staying in so far, pressured to keep his promise to bring it all to a vote, both by defections to the Eurosceptic UKIP party and by backbenchers within his Conservative Party, backbenchers that extend right into the Prime Minister's cabinet by the looks of it. Hence, at the G7 summit in Germany, Cameron found himself fielding mostly questions about his backpedaling over an order to troops to toe the line. A storm in a teacup? Or has Cameron bitten off more than he can chew with his pledge to stare down Brussels before that referendum? We're going to look at his concession demands. More broadly, why is a nation that a few years ago was talking about a referendum on joining the euro now talking about leaving altogether? One that's home to Europe's financial center, where divestment from big expenditures in areas like defense mean more partnership with European neighbors, not less. But a nation where money doesn't explain all, and with the question of what it means to be British high on the minds of citizens in today's Europe. Today in the France 24 debate, we're talking about Cameron's gamble. With us, Jeremy Stubbs. He's chair of the British Conservatives in Paris. Welcome back to the show, sir. Welcome back as well to Yves Bertoncini, director of the Jacques Delors Institute.
Good evening.
Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you.
From London, we're joined by Lucy Thomas, who's campaign director of Business for New Europe. Tell our folks what Business for New Europe is.
We're a coalition of independent business leaders making the positive case to remain in the EU.
All right. Welcome to the show and welcome from Strasbourg. UKIP member of the European Parliament, Tim Acker. Thank you for being with us.
Good evening.
The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and on Twitter, our hashtag F24debate. Should the United Kingdom remain a member of the European Union? That's the simple question the UK Parliament's been asked to submit to voters, not before some serious bargaining with Brussels, though. Clovis Casali has the story.
Debating on a referendum that could change Britain's future, and not all lawmakers attended the session in the House of Commons. Prime Minister David Cameron promised to ask the British people if they wanted to stay or leave the EU. His Foreign Secretary explained why.
Mr. Speaker, to many people, not just in the UK but across Europe, the EU has come to feel like something that is done to them, not for them. An entire generation of British voters has been denied the chance to have a say on our relationship with the European Union. And, Mr. Speaker, today we are putting that right.
The Labour opposition stressed that the outcome of the EU referendum would determine the country's role on the international stage and how Britain is perceived abroad.
We support this bill and its passage through Parliament, but we also support Britain remaining a member of the European Union. And the same cannot be said of all of the honourable and right honourable members opposite.
A clear reference to the dozens of Conservative backbenchers who appear to want to leave the EU. Some would, however, change their minds if David Cameron obtained significant concessions from Europe on a wide range of topics, such as free movement and less EU regulations.
Well, the debate is, again, just beginning. Lots of questions on this. I'll start with you, Jeremy Stubbs. When are we going to see this referendum?
When by 2017. That we know. People are talking of it happening even earlier, in 2016. What's for sure is it's only going to happen when something has been said that will make a difference between David Cameron and the other 28 leaders. That is, I think, a precondition. And it is essential that people feel that something is going to be different afterwards.
Now, you saw in that report that laundry list of demands from David Cameron that were spelled out. How far is he going to get in Brussels?
Well, obviously, he's got a laundry list. We've seen that. But the real movement will come if he gains support from other countries on elements on that list. If other countries feel that they too need changes on those subjects, I think that is the real task he has set himself, is to get some agreement with other countries. It's not really, I don't think, a tactic of sort of suicide. Give us all this or we go. I don't think that would work.
And who can he turn to? Give us names. What countries?
Well, there's my near namesake in Finland, Stubb. I think that we've heard that the Germans are not adverse to some of the things being said. Even Juncker is saying nice things, which is quite new for him with regard to the United Kingdom. I think as well that I don't want to be too needle anyone, Francois, but France is the main problem in a way. France is the one country, it seems, that doesn't want to listen. There will, of course, be some difficulty in Eastern Europe. It'll be very varied there, but they have a very different view of things.
All right, so you're confident that there can be a coalition of those who want to change some of these rules, not just for Britain, you say, but for the whole of the EU. Tim Acker, do you share that optimism?
Oh, God, no, absolutely not. There is absolutely no desire in this place, in this institution, for any sort of fundamental renegotiation the British people want. For the start, the British people do not want complete free movement across the European Union. And there has been absolutely no discussion, no movement, no sign of even moving half an inch from any European leader towards getting rid of free movement as a principle of EU membership. You know, people in the United Kingdom thought they were joining a common market, but now they see it's got a flag, it's got an anthem, it's getting an army, and they're thinking, we didn't sign up for this. They were hoodwinked last time, and I tell you what, if David Cameron comes back from his tour of Europe with a bit of paper saying renegotiation in our time and tries to fob us off again, the British people will look through it and vote to leave.
Bertoncini, the words of the Foreign Secretary Philip Hammond in the Commons today. He said that since Britain voted to join back in 1975, there was a referendum back then too, that the EU has eroded the democratic mandate for our membership, the expansion to 28 nations, to the point where it's wafer thin and needs to be renewed.
Yeah, but it's British choice to make a referendum or not. They had made one in the 70s. Very strange, by the way, 2 years after the accessions, not before, but after. And now they decided to make another one. And in the daily functioning of the EU, of course, the UK is a very, very important actor. And it has a say. I mean, Mr. Cameron at the European Council, the MEPs of the Great Britain in Strasbourg, the commissioner, they have clout. Of course, it's a big country. It's not. I mean, with all due respect, it's not Croatia. It's not Latvia. It's the UK. So of course they have a say. They can be controlled by the national parliaments. They have a good and central position in Europe. Of course, they have to remain member of the European Union because we are stronger together, as the Tory manifesto has underlined. But if they want to obtain, if David Cameron wants to obtain concessions, he will have to be very cautious in what he can obtain or not. I think many countries are ready.
On that point, when Jeremy Stubbs listing some of the nations that could be potential allies in this battle, do you agree with him?
Yeah, of course. I mean, many countries think that UK's should remain member of the European Union. If you look at the world, of course, it's obvious. I mean, we must be united but diverse, but we need to be more united. But it's true that on some issues, some countries could be quite reluctant. The key question is, will these countries, we have mentioned France, we could also include Poland, because Poland, if you look at the free movement of people debate, is now not an opponent, but it's not an ally any longer of London. I mean, are they ready to do whatever it takes? I mean, I think many countries, all of them, are ready to do a lot. But are they ready to do whatever it takes if the demands made by Mr. Cameron are excessive? This is not totally sure, and we'll see this in the next few months.
Lucy Thomas, right now the European Union has another fire to put out, which is, of course, Greece. And we're seeing what a heavy lift those negotiations are. Listening to the discussion so far, what's your prediction as far as the haggling that will go on over Britain? Will it be easier or harder than what we're witnessing right now?
Well, I think we have to start with the things that the rest of Europe also wants to see changed. So both François Hollande and Angela Merkel have been on record talking about seeing what can come back from Brussels. So what can member states decide themselves? So, for example, better scrutiny by national parliaments and perhaps a red card to beef up the current system so that a group of parliaments working together can say, no, we don't want that regulation. And cutting down the red tape so that it isn't always the Commission pumping out rules and really thinking more carefully before introducing things. And so there is agreement on lots of this stuff across Europe. It isn't just a kind of Britain-only, let's bang the table and make our own demands. And just on the free movement point that Tim was talking about, he didn't point out that there are roughly the same number of Britons living in the rest of Europe, just over 2 million, as there are EU migrants living here. So if all of those Britons abroad also want to come back overnight and when he wants to sort of close the borders, then I'm not sure that would go down all that well either.
And what about to the point that was made by Jeremy and by Tim that there are many in Brussels, Jeremy pointing the finger at the French in particular, that will turn a deaf ear to EU reform?
Well, there are obviously some things. If we make the case that it's a Britain-only deal and it's something that we want, we don't care about anyone else, then of course that's going to be tricky. But I think if you start with the things that I was talking about that others also agree with, then that's where you start. I think that Jeremy and others were right that Eastern Europe particularly have problems with some of the in-work benefits. So there are changes you can make both to out-of-work benefits, so unemployment benefits. EU migrants shouldn't be able to come here and from day one claim out-of-work benefits. It's more the in-work benefits that you get, like tax credits and things like that. And the Prime Minister has talked about a 4-year period where EU migrants couldn't claim those. And the Polish government and others have said, well, actually, if we're paying into the tax system, we're contributing in the same way as UK citizens, then surely we should be entitled to those too. So for me, that's probably the toughest tussle that there will be.
Tim Acker on that point?
Well, on that point, I mean, it's very disingenuous for someone from Business for New Europe, where I thought was a prestigious organisation, to come up with a ridiculous straw man argument that if we left the EU, every EU member state is going to turf out British expats. That's ridiculous. All we've been talking about is to actually get back control of our borders, to have the British Parliament decide what the immigration policy is for the United Kingdom. And it's, you know, we've seen early these desperate scare tactics from the pro-European side that don't want any sort of reform. All they want to do is try and scare the British public into staying into an institution that controls our borders, writes our laws, and takes £55 million from us every single day.
But it is a fact that there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Britons who live and some have even retired abroad.
Yeah, and that's an arrangement. We've got expats all over the world. And does that mean we have to be in a political union with America, with Australia, with New Zealand? Absolutely not. We want a genuine, flexible relationship with the European Union, but we can only achieve that outside of the treaties and outside of the European Union. We trade with and cooperate with countries all over the world, and no one is suggesting that we enter into political union with the likes of Mexico, China, Argentina, or any other country in the world. Why do we have to be locked in to a political union that is in decline when there's a world out there, the Commonwealth, the emerging economies that we could have new trade agreements with? Why do we have to look inward? In the 1970s, the European Economic Community might have been the solution, but now in a globalised world, there is better opportunities out there for a free and independent United Kingdom.
Lucy Thomas?
Yeah, well, a couple of points there to start with. I mean, the EU doesn't stop us trading with the rest of the world. It actually makes that much easier. So does Tim also want to rip up the 50 trade agreements we have with the rest of the world, which we're part of as a result of being in the EU? But also, if Tim presumably wants to retain access to the single market, where around half of our exports go, and as part of that agreement, you also have free movement of goods, of services, of capital, and of people. So Norway, for example, who still trade with the EU but are not part of it also have to accept free movement of people. So that there isn't a blueprint of a version of, yeah, we get all the trade, we get all those sort of economic benefits, but none of the other stuff. It simply doesn't work.
Well, there you go. You've let the cat out of the bag. She's let the cat out of the bag. She says there is absolutely no change in any of the fundamental freedoms. There is going to be no fundamental renegotiation that the British people want.
But Tim, you can't close the borders and still trade. You can't close the.
Excuse me. I let you speak. Please show me the courtesy. Plenty of countries manage to trade with other countries without having a complete open border. Yes, they can have flexible relationships, but the capitals of those independent countries and the parliaments of those independent countries still manage their own migration policy. We do not need the European Union to manage our migration policy to be able to trade with any other country. We can be free, independent and flexible, and that's what the British people want.
I simply don't agree. I mean, ask Norway, who have to comply with 80% of EU rules and pay around 80% of what we do into the EU budget. That's just part of being able to access freely the single market. You still have to contribute and you still have to comply with the rules and you still have to accept a degree of migration. And I think it's disingenuous of you to claim that there is this ideal sort of utopia somewhere.
All right.
So all of the countries that trade with the EU, you expect all of the countries that trade with the EU to pay into the EU. You expect us to have a complete open border with Mexico, with South Korea. You expect them to be candidate members for the European Union. Don't be ridiculous. What we've got now is the European Union that is facing an existential crisis. And the fact is that big political unions are breaking up and independent nations are the way forward. What's wrong with free independent cooperation based in Westminster, where the British people decide at the ballot box the direction that their government should take?
All right, Yves Bertoncini, very briefly before we go to the break, on this point, what's going to be the upshot of all this renegotiation? Is it going to be better for Europe or worse for Europe, this debate that we're going to have?
Oh, it can be better for the UK and for Europe if we focus on competitiveness. Yes, of course, everyone wants more competitiveness. The relations between nation states and Brussels, of course, can be improved. Of course, and there can be demands from other countries on this point. On free movement as well, there might be some adjustments in the way it's practiced, but there are fundamental principles in Europe. The Brits have created clubs. They know that to be part of a club, you need to respect some rules. You can push for changing rules. And at the end, the EU is not a jail. If they want to choose to go out of the EU, it will be their choice. I think it would be a mistake, but I'm not voting in this referendum.
All right, we're going to pick up on all this with the rest of our panel. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate.